Hi class. So in the previous video we talked about the description of air masses, and we talked about their homogeneous properties of temperature and moisture. We put the characteristics of temperature and moisture together to come up with the different types of air masses. Now we'll talk about the source regions, so basically where these air masses are going to form. And so there are some qualifications that areas need to have in order to be considered source regions. One of them is they have to be very big. As you can imagine, if an air mass is 1,000 miles across, the source region where it forms has to be very large too. So first qualification is a source region must be very large. Second is that the source region must be physically uniform. It has to be an entirely water surface or an entirely land surface, one of the two. If it's a land surface, it has to be very consistent, like a prairie in Canada. We'll talk about that one a lot. So it can't be a forested area and a prairie and a mountain. It has to be one specific type of uniform surface, such as a prairie. And then the last qualification for a source region is that it has to be an area that has little atmospheric circulation, because the air needs to stagnate over the source region for an extended period of time to take on the temperature and moisture characteristics of that source region. And so as a result, we're going to find that source regions are pretty much limited to being north of 50 degrees north latitude and south of about 30 degrees north latitude. Because in between here, we have got the jet stream. And so I know we haven't had time to talk about the jet stream, but the jet stream is this river of air. And I know you've noticed that when we're looking at weather systems going across the mid-latitudes, going across the United States, they always go from west to east. And that's because we've got this jet stream that flows. It's a river of air that flows across, again, the mid-latitudes. It can go up north of 50 degrees north, and it can go south of 30 degrees north. But typically, it is located between 30 and 50 degrees north latitude. So this is not going to be a good area, a good source region for air masses, because the air is just constantly moving through this area between 30 degrees north and 50 degrees north. So typically your source regions are going to be found north of 50 degrees north and south of 30 degrees north. Okay. Now, we talked about properties of temperature and moisture. So we talked about polar air masses, Arctic air masses. We talked about tropical air masses. Those are the temperature characteristics, and the moisture characteristics of either being continental or maritime. So now let's put those concepts together and figure out where these all form. So one air mass that is very important to the United States is a continental polar air mass. And that forms over the Canadian prairies, just to the north of the U.S.-Canadian border. And a second one is much further north. It'd be a continental Arctic air mass. This would be a wintertime only air mass. So winter only is continental Arctic. Continental polar is going to be year-round, but it's going to be specific to the time of year. In wintertime, our high temperatures are going to be in 20s, our low temperatures are going to be in the single digits. Continental polar air in the summertime, temperatures are going to be in the lower 70s and for high temperatures, and low temperatures in the lower 50s. There are also maritime polar air masses, and those will be in the North Pacific Ocean and the Northwest Atlantic Ocean. All right, so there's our air masses that are more polar or Arctic in nature. And to the south, we've got our warmer air masses. We've got continental tropical air masses that form, this is a summertime only air mass, and so this forms in the northern parts of Mexico, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona, and so that would be continental tropical. Continental, it forms over the land. Tropical, it's going to be a warm air mass. Okay, and then we've got maritime tropical. So that's going to form pretty much over the Gulf of Mexico and over the southwestern Atlantic, and another maritime tropical in the eastern tropical Pacific. Okay, so again, maritime means it's moist, tropical means it's warm. Continental means it's dry, tropical means it's warm. Maritime polar, maritime means it's moist, polar means it's cold, or in this case probably cool. Continental polar, continental means it's dry, polar means it's cold, cold and dry. Continental Arctic means that it's going to be continental, it's going to be dry. Arctic means it's going to be very cold. Okay? And so those are the source regions that are important to the United States. And so now we've covered air masses. Next we're going to talk about fronts.